All right, I'm excited to have our next presentation, which I think drew all of this attention today to our program on sleep. I'm pleased to have Dr. Michael Howell, a neurologist and specialist in sleep disorders and sleep wellness. He is the vice chair for education in the Department of Neurology at the University of Minnesota, as well as the medical director of the Fairview Sleep Center in Edina. His clinical interests include REM, sleep behavior disorder, and sleep wellness. So let's welcome Dr. Howell. Yeah.
Got it. Okay, well, thank you so much, Erin, and I'm honored to be here. This is a fantastic showing. Welcome all to the Maplewood Community Center. Sleep, it's just inherently fascinating, isn't it? Here it is. It's a third of your life. You're unconscious for it. This has been preserved across evolution. All animals sleep. So it must be doing some incredibly important things. As it turns out, it is. It's more important that you sleep than you drink water, for example. If an animal is fully deprived of sleep, they will die faster than if they are fully deprived of water. The challenge is, though, is that for many of us, especially those of us with Parkinson's disease, we have a tremendous amount of trouble sleeping. About 75% of individuals will describe at least occasional trouble falling asleep, but if you're talking about somebody with Parkinson's disease, it's probably more like 90%. And there's very few things that are as frustrating as lying in bed and trying to fall asleep and you can't, or if you're struggling with some other sleep problems, whether or not that might be restless leg syndrome, or whether or not it may be bradykinesia or dream enactment. There's a lot of challenges that can come up in life and in Parkinson's disease, and so it's worthwhile to spend a little bit of time trying to explore what the journey is to sleep better. And I say it that way because I've been teaching and talking about sleep for many years, and what I often find is that there is often this sense that there is some solution out there for your problem, which is the wrong way to think about it. There is often a sense that I just need a certain medication, or a certain new medication, or a new dose of medication, or a homeopathic supplement, or a mindfulness program. I'm just missing that one thing. That is not true. Improving your sleep, just like improving all sorts of things, comes down to a journey. And the sooner we understand that, the more likely that you're going to be able to start sleeping better. So I'm speaking to everyone here in this room, whether or not you have Parkinson's disease or not, to recognize that sleeping better is a challenge that actually takes a while and you need to walk through it. And part of that first piece, often for many people, is just to find the right motivation to sleep better and to prioritize sleep. We live in a world where sleep deprivation is part of our modern culture. There is a reason why there is a coffee shop on every corner in the industrialized world, and that is because we are sleep deprived, right? And I get it, there are all sorts of barriers for modern life. I'm just speaking to people in general, not particularly Parkinson's disease right now. There are all sorts of barriers as to why people don't sleep as much as they should. Sometimes it's just motivation, because when you don't sleep, when you stay up late, wake up early one particular early morning, yes, you're a little more tired. Yes, you're a little bit sleepier. But in general, you have all of these other priorities, whether or not they're family, work, school, that get in the way of you sleeping better. And part of my mission is to help people understand the hidden consequences of not getting enough adequate, good quality sleep. So thinking about that a little bit, is we've learned tremendous amounts over the course of the last decade on the importance of what happens in the brain when we're sleeping. So your brain is composed of 100 billion neurons, 100 trillion connections. And those connections are constantly making new connections with each other. They're getting stronger as you go throughout your day and you're experiencing things, whether or not it's a meeting at the Parkinson's Foundation, or whether or not it's spending some time with family, watching television or reading. All day long, your brain is constantly your neurons are constantly in a little struggle with each other to try to make new connections, whether or not it's a crossword puzzle or just trying to remember what the grocery list is. Unfortunately, though, your brain is a limited space. Your skull is not getting any bigger. And so there is a limit to how many new connections your brain can make. And so what happens is every night when we go into deep, slow wave sleep, those 100 trillion little connections get pruned down. They get trimmed. They get clipped. They get a little weaker. And what that's doing is essentially it's taking a blackboard and it's wiping down the blackboard to make more room to learning again the next day. So sleep is, in many ways, a way to wipe away the noise of all the things that weren't particularly useful. In addition to that, during REM sleep, when we're dreaming, is when it amplifies the signal of what really is important in our lives. And how does that work? Well, when we go about our lives and we experience emotions with a particular experience, whether or not that's joy or laughter or anger or disgust or fear, your brain takes that experience, puts an emotion to it, and you're more likely to remember it. And if I ask you, if I just mention, 2 or 3 of the most embarrassing moments of your life, every single person in this room instantly thinks of a couple of things. You will never forget them, unfortunately, for myself included. And how does that work? Well, it works because as we go about our experiences during the day, we have these little brain circuits that get amplified with strong emotion, and it gets amplified particularly when we're dreaming. So when we go dreaming, our brain goes to the areas of the brain where emotions are strongest, and it replays these experiences, whether or not that's something frightening or terrifying or joyful or whatever it is, which is why dreams are often these vivid emotional experiences. So what's happening then overall during sleep is that you're pruning away the noise during that slow wave sleep and then amplifying the signal. So hopefully at the morning, what has happened is that your brain is now in better balance with each other. Your brain's connections are now in better balance, and you're better able to function the next day. That's what happens when you have good sleep. In addition to that, there are many other aspects of sleep that we don't often think about. If you're not sleeping well, one obvious one that I talk about with patients on occasion, or quite frequently, is being tired and sleepy is a miserable experience, but it is not life-threatening, with one exception, and that is falling asleep while driving. So more people fall asleep. There are more fall asleep motor vehicle accidents in this country than there are alcohol-related motor vehicle accidents. It's a huge public health problem, all right? In addition to that, sometimes it's not just falling asleep. What happens when you're sleepy? Well, you're a little less likely to look in your mirrors, right? Right? You're a little more irritable. Like, why that guy cut me off? When you're like, if I would have talked to you, after a decent night of sleep or in a normal circumstance, you're a perfectly normal individual. But we tend to get we're a little quicker to get upset when we're driving, when we're sleep deprived. In addition to that, other aspects of sleep that we might not think about is our immune system. It's when you are asleep that your immune system, your immune cells are reactivated and ready to go for the next day. Very clear example of this, the less good sleep you get, the more likely you're going to get ill, the more likely you'll pick up an infection, the more likely when you get sick, it'll take longer to recover from it. Those of you who get flu shots, you want to when you get your next flu shot, one of the best ways to make sure it works well is get a couple extra hours the night before. We know that very clearly, that if you are sleep deprived the night before you get a flu shot, it is far less likely to be effective. And then in addition to that, we know that sleep is also important for cardiovascular health and weight management. When we wake up, people imagine one of the best things you should do is get up early and go for a walk. Wrong. Sleep in, get your walk later. When you wake up early before you otherwise would, you are going to be hungrier. Your cells secrete a molecule, your fat cells in your body secrete a molecule called leptin. Leptin is the satiety hormone. It's the thing that tells you that you should be full and you shouldn't eat anymore. And if you wake up early, you do not have that molecule circulating around as much. So you're far more likely to be hungry. you're less likely to notice that you're full, and then you're also more likely to make wrong food choices the more sleep deprived that you are. In addition to that, the more sleep you get, the more energy you have, the more likely that you actually will get more exercise. So I mean, I could imagine someone waking up to go for a walk early or to go for a bike ride, but then if I actually measure their amount of physical activity the rest of the day, it's far more depressed than somebody who would just sleep in. But let's face it, despite everything I just told you, sometimes the idea of having good brain health and decreased risk of cardiovascular disease and better weight management, in addition, oh, by the way, also lower risk of malignancy and Alzheimer's disease by sleeping better, sometimes that just doesn't do it for a lot of people. Which is, and I'm not minimizing that. There's a lot of barriers that are preventing us from heeding the call to actually sleeping better. Life just gets in the way. We still have kids we got to take care of. We still have jobs we have to go to. We still have family members we have to take care of. All of these things get in the way of sleeping better, which is why I was thrilled to see a study come up a few years ago that showed that if you sleep better, you actually drop 3 strokes off your golf game. My father, retired surgeon, God love him, was not particularly interested and fascinated in the vast majority of things that I was doing. But when I told him that sleeping better will drop 3 strokes on his golf game, this was a study, it was nicely done. He was like, oh my God, you're finally talking about something important. Right? And this is not complete mockery. There's something to this, which is you have to find people where they are and find the motivation that works for them. All right? And in many ways, athletics is a great example of this, because athletes, what are they but other, they're human performers. Olympic athlete who is a figure skater, whether or not it's Tom Brady, whether or not it's LeBron James. These individuals are great performers because athletic performance is brain performance. Too often we think about athletic performance as just muscular strength. Well, look, you can go to any gym. In fact, you can probably go down here to the Y and see a variety of people who are just incredibly svelte, physically fit individuals, but they are not great athletes because they don't have an athletic brain. Their brain isn't working as well as it otherwise could be. And how do you actually develop an athletic brain? Is you sleep better. Tom Brady, clearly the best quarterback who ever lived. 9 Super Bowl appearances, 6 Super Bowl wins. The second in line was 5 appearances by John Elway. Tom Brady takes great pride in the amount of sleep and the high quality sleep he gets. LeBron James, great basketball player. When you look at him, everybody just is so impressed by his physical presence, how huge he is. But the truth is he's got an incredible athletic brain and mind, and he sleeps very well. One more final thought on athletics before we move on. For those of you who may remember the 2002 Winter Olympics, Sarah Hughes was a 16-year-old young woman who entered on the U.S. women's figure skating team. She was a great underdog compared to Michelle Kwan, who was expected to win that year. So she's 16 years old, very ambitious young woman, doing well in school, and makes the U.S. Olympic team, but is just completely plateauing out. She's not getting any better. She's probably not going to do very well. She meets a colleague of mine from Cornell, Dr. James Moss, who spent a little bit of time with her and said, you're getting up at 4:30 in the morning to do practice ice skating in addition to afternoon skates and school and everything else. He said, that's it. You can't wake up at 4:30 in the morning. You have to sleep in. Everybody thought he was nuts. Everybody thought she was nuts. She's on her way to the Olympics. And you're telling me that she has to stop practicing and sleep in? Well, all of those pathways in her brain that she's trying to create, she's not creating them, and she's not laying them down because she's not sleeping well. So And what did she do? She went on to become the first woman to ever do 7 triple jumps in a long program and won the gold medal. So, I mean, if what we actually care about is human performance and how we're functioning, sleep is critically important. All right, now, it's getting back to kind of something a little bit more terrestrial for all of us. So this is all great, you may say, but I go to bed. I mean, I would love to sleep, but I go to bed, I can't fall asleep. And I get it. Insomnia is a real challenge. And nobody ever laid awake in a dark room and stared at the ceiling and thought about how great their life was. It's never happened. I don't care who you are. I don't care how happy you are right now. If I were to put you in a bed and you weren't sleepy, which does not include everybody in this room, but if I were to put you in a bed right now and say, go ahead and clear your mind, lay down, try to fall asleep. So for those of you who are still awake, I guarantee you 10 minutes later, you are not feeling the same way as you did when you started. You're starting to worry about bills, relationships, your health, all these sorts of things that just creep into your mind because the brain abhors a vacuum. If you try to clear your mind, it's going to start putting stuff in there, and you may not like the stuff that's put in there. So laying there and trying to fall asleep and not being able to fall asleep is extremely challenging. However, as we talked about before, in order to become a better sleeper requires recognizing that this is a journey to get better. There's no homeopathic therapy or meditation strategy or medication or sleep study or CPAP machine in and of itself which will solve this. Not to minimize any of those other things because they're often very useful and very helpful. The first thing is to actually first understand what your sleep problem is. So if you're lying there and you're having trouble falling asleep, it's very easy to become overwhelmed with all of the challenges in terms of falling asleep at night. My brain just won't shut down, right? It's the wrong way to think about it. First question to ask yourself, so if you're somebody who's laying there in bed and trying to fall asleep and you can't, next question to ask you is what happens in the morning? So let's say it's 10 o'clock at night, 11 o'clock at night, you go to bed, you lie down, you can't fall asleep for an hour or so, it's very frustrating. My question is what happens in the morning at whatever time you want to wake up, at 6, 6:30, whatever time. If you're the kind of person who, when that alarm clock goes off at 6 o'clock in the morning and you're hitting the snooze alarm 30 times, and you can sleep in quite a bit later if given the opportunity. You don't have to get up for Parkinson's Foundation event or doctor's appointment or work or school or any of those sorts of things. If you can sleep in the morning, you don't have a falling asleep problem. Your brain is perfectly capable of falling asleep. It's just doing it at the wrong time. You're living in the wrong time zone. And this is incredibly common, particularly amongst younger individuals. This is, amongst teenagers, for example. Their body's circadian rhythm, their 24-hour clock is delayed. So what does that look like? That means when you go to bed at 10, 11 o'clock at night, my brain just won't fall asleep. This is a miserable experience, but then when the alarm clock goes off in the morning, I can still keep sleeping in. What do you do about that? Well, the solution to that does not lie in doing something at night. Once you're in bed, it's 11 o'clock at night, and you're not falling asleep, get out. There's nothing I can tell you at that moment that's going to help you fall asleep. Stop trying. Get out. But what you can do is you can focus on doing the right thing in the morning, which is get up in the morning and get bright light exposure. What kind of bright light? Ideally, that big fusing ball of helium in the sky, our sun, which is human beings are great with sunrises. It resets our circadian rhythm, but most of us don't get them. Certainly we don't get them here in Minnesota in the wintertime, right, on a consistent basis. It's often cloudy, but bright light is extremely important, especially in the development of Parkinson's disease. And as we get older, as our brains start to lose track, our brains and bodies start to lose track of when the sun has gone up and when the sun has come down. And this commonly leads into troubles of going to bed at night, not being able to fall asleep, but sleepy all day long. One of the first things you got to do is you got to remind your brain when the sun comes up. And you do that with bright light exposure, ideally the sun, on your face, through a window, through shades, doesn't count. It's got to be on your eyeballs. Don't stare at it. The other thing is, but let's say, short of moving to Florida, not a bad idea sometimes, but short of doing that, also get yourself a light box. So a 10,000 lux light box. It's the same thing. If these are the same thing as people with seasonal affective disorder, SAD lamps, there's bright lights, really good idea. I have several of them in the house. You can get them on Amazon for $40. Get several of them, and then just make sure you use them in the morning. Don't use them in the evening. That's going to cause other problems, but make sure they're on in the morning. In addition to that, so if this circadian rhythm challenge of difficulty falling asleep and difficulty waking up describes you at all, in addition to using that light in the morning, you can use melatonin. Melatonin is a hormonal cue of darkness. It's not an over-the-counter sleeping pill. It just lets your body know when the sun went down. That's all it does. Think of it as a vitamin. Take it in very small doses, milligram at the most, which is actually usually a pediatric dropper full. So get a very small amount and take it a couple hours before you'd like to go to bed. If what I'm describing is you at all, which is trouble falling asleep at night, trouble waking up in the morning. And what's that doing? It's just reminding you that sun goes down, sun goes up. We are on a planet in the solar system that's spinning around every 24 hours, and it's reminding your brain where you are on it. Because all of this light that we're exposed to in the evening, screens, this thing, these things, tablets, televisions, computers, all of these things trick our brain into thinking that the sun is still out, which is not good for us. Okay? All right. But let's say that's not you. Let's say you're the kind of person, you go to bed, you lie awake, can't shut your brain down, can't fall asleep at night, but then 6 o'clock in the morning, you couldn't sleep any longer even if I paid you to. Even I came in, here's $10,000 for you to sleep another hour. You couldn't do it. Okay? That's a whole different challenge. That is to recognize that there is a hypervigilance. Your brain is just hyperactive 24 hours a day, and it's not letting sleep enter into it. And usually how people got there is all of the stress that comes along with trying to get a good night of sleep, trying to fall asleep, recognizing, you go and you listen to somebody like me tell you about how sleep is going to help you manage your weight and decrease your risk of cardiovascular disease and malignancy and all these, you get all, I make it worse because I get everybody whipped up about the idea of like how important sleep is, and then all of a sudden you put pressure on yourself. You can't do that. Sleepiness is something that should just flow naturally to you. And if it's not there, wait for it. But don't try to force it. There's nothing you cannot think yourself sleepy. You can think yourself sleepy about as easily as you can sleep yourself hungry. Okay? So I don't know about any of you here. I mean, it looks like you just had a great lunch. But let's say, I don't know whether or not you had a snack earlier or maybe you're just not feeling right or whatever it is. But let's say it's 6 o'clock tonight and you're not hungry. What would you do about that? Would you worry about it? Would you say there's something wrong with me? I'm not hungry right now? Would you get out a big plate of food and put it in front of you and say, I'm going to sit and stare at this food until I get hungry? It looks so good. Why am I not salivating right now? I'm going to just keep doing this. So if you do that long enough, two things will happen. One, you will eventually get hungry. And it had nothing to do with you sitting there. It just was going to happen eventually anyway. But oftentimes, because of the way our minds work, we're like, look, I was successful. It only took me 2.5 hours, but I got hungry. And two, the other thing I want to tell you about that, so if you do that enough times, you'll give yourself an eating disorder, right? That's what people do with sleep all the time. They go to bed, they're not sleepy, they're tired, they're exhausted, they want to sleep, they keep thinking about how great sleep is, but they're not sleepy. And what do I mean by sleepy? I mean you're falling asleep. That's what sleepy is. So you shouldn't go to bed unless you're sleepy, which is hard because, all the sleep hygiene recommendations, go to bed all the time at the same time, all those sorts of things. But if you are lying there and you're trying to fall asleep and you're trying to make something happen that's just not coming, you're actually making the problem worse. And you got to hit the road. You got to get out of bed. I don't care how comfortable it is. I don't care how expensive the mattress was. And they're expensive out there. My God. More expensive than my car. Of course, I have a pretty cheap car. Where was I? I should stick to my prepared comments. All right. But anyway, so then you're in bed and you're not falling asleep. You got to get out of bed. Sorry, you got to get out. You're making the problem worse. So you get out of bed and what do? Well, you go do something you enjoy. Because sleep should be a pleasurable experience. So whatever it is that you're doing at 11, midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, it should be something you enjoy. Can't be work. Can't be chores. Because you're going to have to, ultimately, when you're going to be sleeping better, you're going to have to do all those things during the day anyway, so you're going to have to figure that out. But you got to just limit yourself to stuff that you enjoy doing. So, and why that's important is because when you wake up at 1 o'clock in the morning, you can't sleep anymore, you should say, okay, I get to go read that book about Teddy Roosevelt I've been looking forward to reading. Or whatever it is that you want. Okay? Then you go do that outside of your bedroom, dim lighting, avoid these. And this is where mindfulness comes in. You had a great talk on mindfulness early. Mindfulness is really important in helping you recognize when you're actually sleepy, being mindful and aware of when your somnolence is coming to you. Not when you're tired, not when you're exhausted and you really want sleep, but when you're actually sleepy. And then when you get sleepy, you go back to bed. And usually the first couple times you try this, it doesn't work particularly well. So a lot of times for the first couple nights, you're actually not in bed, you're not sleeping very much, and you're not in bed very much. Guess what? You just paid it forward to tomorrow night. You're more likely to be successful tomorrow night. This is a pay it forward situation. So you don't sleep much tonight? Great. Tomorrow night you'll probably sleep better as long as you maintain these rules of don't go to bed when you're not sleepy. And also the other rule is don't fall asleep outside of the bedroom. So you can't do this, go read your book by Edmund Morris on the couch and then fall asleep there, because then you just conditioned yourself to that response. That's not good either. So, and if you keep with that, in addition, there's other strategies you can do in terms of avoiding drinking caffeine late. Alcohol, even in moderation, leads to fragmented sleep, not to mention it worsens sleep apnea. So if you're having sleep troubles, I would just advise just trying to avoid alcohol as much as possible. People say like, well, I've been having my glass of red wine every night for 5 years. Great. Do you have any trouble sleeping? No. Fine. Then keep doing it. But if you have trouble sleeping, I would cut it out. All right? All right. So that's the challenges: falling asleep, staying asleep, and a few steps you can do about it. But for many people with Parkinson's disease, a real common challenge with falling asleep is restlessness, right? So you go to bed, and your brain may be sleepy, and you may be wanting to fall asleep, but you just can't get comfortable. This is just part of the Parkinsonian process, right? It's that restlessness. I purposely use the term restlessness as opposed to restless leg syndrome. There's this overwhelming urge. You're lying there. You can fall asleep, but in theory, you could fall asleep if your body would let you, but you just have this overwhelming urge. You need to get up. You need to move around, and that's usually better addressed by appropriate timing of dopaminergic medications. Another important thing to think about, however, is iron levels. So iron is really important in the development of dopamine, so you want to have good, healthy iron levels. And then a couple other things just to talk about. So other challenges with all of us that any of us can have, but are particularly troublesome in Parkinson's disease, is sleep-disordered breathing. So snoring and obstructive sleep apnea is very common. Depending upon how you want to define it, anywhere between 10 to 20% of the adult population has trouble keeping their airway open when they're sleeping. More common as we get older, more common as we get heavier. And the challenge there is just to keep the upper airway open. And the conventional strategies is a CPAP machine. CPAP machine is a mask that goes over the nose, makes a pneumatic seal, blows air, no added oxygen, keeps the back of the throat open. It works great for 50% of people. The other 50% of people, it sits nicely collecting dust in the closet. There are other treatment options for sleep apnea, including dental appliances that help hold your jaw forward. There are surgeries for sleep apnea. And sometimes it's just mild enough. All you need to do is just sleep propped up over on your side. Sometimes that's all people need. I take care of a condition called REM sleep behavior disorder, which I'm sure many of you have some degree of experience with. This is dream enactment. So normally when we're dreaming, we are paralyzed. We're nice and still. We're not moving. At least that's how it's supposed to work. But for many people, usually in middle age, all of a sudden we start moving quite a bit more when we're dreaming. And this is distinct from sleepwalking and night terrors. This is, I am dreaming that I'm being chased by a dog and I need to run away and I'm jumping out of bed. Or I am dreaming that I'm being attacked by a bear and I wake up and terrifyingly I'm about ready to hit my spouse. This is also associated often with, kind of loud verbalizations, sometimes swearing. I've had many sweet little old ladies in my office who they haven't sworn in 50 years, and then all of a sudden it just sounds like they just left port on the USS Roosevelt, And there's other, this is, and all this is just what normally happens when we're dreaming. Our brain works through all of these things. And if you have REM sleep behavior disorder where you're not paralyzed, you then act out all these behaviors and you vocalize, you get away from me, expletive. It's very frightening. As I'm sure many people in this room can attest. Terrifying for both patients and bed partners. It is very much an identifiable condition. It usually strikes before people get Parkinson's disease or dementia with Lewy bodies. However, usually this is one of the early signs, just like constipation and having trouble smelling. This is my particular condition that I'm researching and studying as a goal of developing protective therapy from preventing Parkinson's disease from developing. That's our ultimate overall goal and our long-term mission. What to do about it? So, first of all, it is very important if I am describing you at all with dream enactment that you do get this identified and managed. So it is worthwhile to do a sleep study to actually characterize this. There are other conditions that can look like it, but just over-the-counter, melatonin is often a very good treatment for this. And this is in much higher doses than what I mentioned before. So I mentioned before 1 milligram at most if you have that 24-hour body clock timing issue. For REM disorder, we're talking more about 3 milligrams, 6 milligrams, 9 milligrams to kind of, and taken right at bedtime to knock this behavior down. There's another medication called clonazepam, which is an old-fashioned sleeping medication, which seems to work pretty well in these conditions in terms of knocking the behaviors down. Other challenges with Parkinson's disease are, actually the most common challenge with Parkinson's disease in sleep is just the inability to roll over in bed. We kind of think about what normal healthy sleep should look like, and oftentimes the general public envisions, someone going to bed and lying there like they just, a letter slid into an envelope, right? Just you climb into bed and you wake up and the sheets are just pristine. That is not healthy sleep. Normally we should roll over, move, adjust positions about every 20 minutes. That's normal. You don't know you're doing it because you should be asleep. I'm like, oh, God, I gotta, But that's really hard. That's really hard, especially with advanced Parkinson's, to kind of adjust the bodies over. A couple things that can be done about that is just, if appropriate, is increasing your dopamine dose in the evening so that it kind of persists more through night so that you can move around a little bit more. The downsides there is that levodopa and anything that increases dopa can actually make nightmares a little bit worse, more vivid dreams, right? I'm sure many of you can probably attest to that. So this is a balance. So, and then finally, just talking about during the daytime, what makes us feel so tired and sleepy with Parkinson's. So first of all is always go back. I sound like a broken record sometimes. You got to go back to the circadian rhythm. You got to go back to your body's 24-hour clock and understand your circadian journey in terms of where your body is on the planet that is currently spinning. And if it doesn't understand that you're in the central time zone and it actually wants to be somewhere else on the planet right now, it's really important to focus on that bright light therapy first thing in the morning. But there's many reasons why people can feel tired and sleepy with Parkinson's, though. Just the disease itself is affecting transmitters in your brainstem that are preventing your brain from waking up adequately. The dopamine we give you can make you feel sleepy, which really sucks because you get it coming and going both ways, right? It's the disease itself is making you sleepy, and then the medication makes you sleepy. So that's finding the balance is hard. It's not easy to do. So there are stimulant medications that you can take, though, that kind of can help you wake up when appropriate. None of these things have trivial side effects. However, they do have cardiovascular risks that go along with them, anxiety, those sorts of things. And then just any underlying sleep problem is going to make you feel more tired and sleepy. So if you have restlessness, untreated obstructive sleep apnea, those sorts of things. And that I think that pretty much brings me to the end. I just point out that sleep challenges are just so incredibly prevalent in Parkinson's. I'm sorry about that. This is something that has been noticed way back in the beginning. So I had the pleasure, a couple years ago, just a second, sir. A couple years ago, I looked up and read the original monograph from James Parkinson in 1817, and he described pretty much everything we just described to you in the last 40 minutes. He described people who have trouble falling asleep, people who have agitation at night, people who are sleepy during the day and constantly falling asleep. He described restlessness. He described tremors at night. All of these things we've known for a long time, which doesn't make them easier, but it is very much, sleep challenges are very much part and parcel with Parkinson's disease. Yes, sir?
Can you talk about nocturia and sleep disorder? I can sometimes go for a long period of 2 or 3 hours. And then other days, 8 or 10 hours of uninterrupted sleep.
So the question was nocturia, just having to get up and go to the bathroom at night. So couple comments, and I'll take this back a little bit. So what should normal sleep look like? What is ideal sleep? So oftentimes when I ask people how they would like to sleep, I know what the answer is going to be already when I ask it, but I want to hear themselves say it, which is, you know what I want? I want to go to bed, I don't know, pick a time, 11. I want to be out. I want to wake up like 7-8 hours later. I want to feel great. That doesn't exist. That is not the goal. Think about that for a second. As we were evolving in East Africa, if our species was just needed like 8 hours of uninterrupted sack time, we would have been eaten millions of years ago. What is normal healthy sleep? Normal healthy sleep is you fall asleep, you're out for about 90 minutes. Then you're up. And then you go back to sleep for about 90 minutes. And then it repeats itself over the course of the night. So many people will come into me and say, I go to bed, I fall asleep great, and I wake up at midnight. Then I wake up at 1:30. And I wake up at 3. And then I wake up at 4:30. Congratulations, you have perfectly normal, healthy sleep. They're like, well, but I don't feel great during the day. Okay, well, what's that? It's not from those awakenings, I can tell you. There could be something else going on, whether or not it's the Parkinson's or the medication or your circadian rhythm or sleep apnea or restlessness, but it's not the awakenings in and of themselves. I'm getting to your nocturia question about having to go to, get up and urinate, is because as we get older and our bladder is less able to, retain urine for longer periods of time, or we have more urinary urgency, you wake up and it's 1:30 in the morning and you're like, well, I suppose I better go to the bathroom now. Meanwhile, on the other hand, if you were sitting here right now, a lot of times during the day, you might, if you thought about it, you're like, I guess I could probably go to the bathroom now. But at 2 o'clock in the morning, you're like, well, if I don't do it now, I'm going to have to do it an hour from now. So I might as well do it now. But guess what? You're going to wake up an hour from now anyway. And then you're going to think about it again. So I kind of get to your answer backwards, sir, which is that actually there's nothing wrong with getting up a couple times in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom. You should be able to do that and wake up the next morning and feel good. Yes, sir. Oh, God, do I want to go there or not? I'm happy for you. See, there's this debate in my head right now. Do I point out everything that's wrong with that, or do I just say, God bless, and I wish you the best and go forward? So, and I don't mean to, I always, after the end of this, I was like, well, what do you think of Benadryl? What do you think about Ambien? What do you think about melatonin? What do you think about St. John's wort? What do you think about this mindfulness app? What do you think about this? I'm like, you're looking at it the wrong way. Sleep is a journey. You got to first go through and ask yourself a question of, why am I waking up in the middle of the night? Is it not a problem at all? Am I going to fall back asleep right away? Is it restlessness? Is it, that overactive mind we talked about it before? Is it a circadian rhythm problem? Is it sleep apnea? Fix those things first. And that takes a process. That's not easy to kind of figure out. I will point out that Benadryl and these other anticholinergic agents have been associated with increased risk of falls and dementia and fall asleep motor vehicle accidents the next day. I don't mean to pick on you. So, what I would say is, don't go looking for one straight solution to whatever your sleep problem is. That being said, I've heard that many times. So, but that's my role is not to give you a particular single answer to these things. That's not what I do. Yes, my dear. Yes.
How many hours of sleep should you get a night?
So the question was how many hours? And we'll get over there in a second, sir. So the question was how many hours, and what I actually would suggest is don't ask the question. And I say this to everybody, which is, because everybody thinks, when anybody thinks about sleep, they often think about the amount of hours. More important than the amount is actually the timing of it. So when is your body's natural sleep rhythm? When would your body most likely to fall asleep, and when would it wake up? If you're not sleeping in your body's natural sleep rhythm, your sleep is not going to be restful. So some people are early birds. Some people are night owls. Some people sleep at night and have a chunk of sleep during the middle of the day. All of those are fine if you can make them work for yourself and your lifestyle and everything else. If you can't, you better understand that first and then move them around accordingly. But in general, teenagers need about 9 to 10 hours of sleep. Adults need 7 to 8, 8.5. And then as we get older, we tend to need a little bit less sleep, and the sleep we get is more fragmented. Yes?
A couple of things. The first one is the fact that sleeping for me, in the last 4 to 5 years, we had a mattress that was a fantastic pillow. And it was like laying in a bladder. And just trying to turn was just incredible. I changed that fact to a mattress that's somewhat puffy, but at least I can turn, and you talk about it at night, it was almost night and day difference on that one. The other thing is that you talk about going to the bathroom, and one of the things that I had just recently is I got Botox. It had nothing to do with my eyes or...
You look fantastic.
Yeah, but it was supposed to help, but I'm still virtually under the same circumstance with 100 milligrams or whatever, and they talk about 2 or 3. Having said that, when I got my blood checked, especially on the Parkinson's side, I'm thinking here, is that virtually when my blood was checked, I never had both the iron and zinc. And I don't know if zinc is a concept here, but the iron was never checked. And one of the things you talk about, is the iron. Nobody seems to know, as to what the numbers would be for iron. Should I go and eat a I-beam for breakfast, or what's the deal?
Yeah. Thank you for bringing up the comment on iron. Iron is incredibly important. It is it's iron deficiency is very prevalent. It is extremely difficult to measure because the only thing that we routinely do is we measure your iron here, right, in your blood. And I don't really care all that much about your iron in your blood. What I care about is your iron in your brain, and this often has very little correlation with what's going on up here. So short of doing a brain biopsy, any takers? It's very hard to figure out what your iron level is. Then once you know what it is, even if you knew what it is, it's very difficult to replace. Your gut just does not like to absorb iron. I'd love to give more people iron infusions, but it's very difficult to get insurance to cover them too. So, but in general, my general principle is work on trying to get iron through a healthy, balanced diet. Yes, sir.
I feel bedding makes a difference. How do you feel about that?
Is the bedding?
Yes.
Oh, the sheets?
Well, the sheets.
Yeah.
I found a really, that's difficult with that. I found a really soft, cuddly blanket. Because it's touching me from the waist up, I fall asleep almost immediately.
I think all of us kind of have our own preferences in terms of bedding and mattresses and sheets and all of those sorts of things. The challenge comes in, which is because where I'm sitting is always, okay, I have someone sitting in front of me who's having trouble sleeping. Would I recommend any particular sheet, mattress? I got nothing in terms of evidence to support anything, really. I just be honest with you. It's which is not to say that you don't have your own preference and he doesn't have his own preference and I might have my own preference. But in terms of prospectively telling the next person to come along, go along and get this mattress and this pillow, there's anybody who tells you otherwise, commercials from a company here in the state of Minnesota notwithstanding, there's no evidence for that. There really isn't. I'd be the first, I'll be the first to be out there with my face on a billboard telling you about how great a pillow is as soon as I have any evidence that it's any real evidence that it's any better than anything else. Yes, ma'am.
I only sleep in 3 hours. I only sleep for 3 hours, and then I'm out.
So the question was, I only sleep for 3 hours at a time? I think that's fine. We need to break ourselves out of this idea that we need to get this long consolidated chunk of sleep. That's a myth. And the more we chase after that, the more trouble we get into with sedating medications that cause all of these other problems. So anyway. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
I have 3 questions.
Okay, well, let's do one at a time because I have a terrible recollection. Otherwise, I'll just answer the last one. So you might as well just ask that one first.
The first one is maybe a short one. more symptoms of Parkinson's? Is that the circadian rhythms just get messed up?
So the question is about circadian rhythms, which is the easiest way to think about it is your body's internal clock letting you know where on the planet you are as it is spinning around. That degenerates, unfortunately, tragically. Well, it actually happens in all of us as we get older, but it's more common in the setting of Parkinson's disease. So, most important thing to do, bright light, first thing in the morning, every day, without fail. That's really important. You can also use a little bit of melatonin, small amount, 1 milligram, no more than that, a couple hours before bed. Yes?
Okay, so, and the others, do you have any opinions on weighted blankets for sleeping and food? What about food and eating perspective?
Okay, so weighted blankets. Again, I mean, this is, what I'll hear is like somebody loves weighted blankets and you don't like weighted blankets and they like weighted blankets. I think for some people who have restless leg syndrome, I think weighted blankets can be kind of a useful tool. But, just as a general rule, people either like them or they don't like them. And then the third question.
Eating.
So the food isn't, the type of food you eat is not nearly as important as its timing. So you want to have a kind of consistent, you're keeping a consistent circadian rhythm with bright light in the morning also has to do with meal timing. So sometimes people say, I don't eat breakfast. Like, okay. But what you're just saying is that when you ultimately put food in your gut at some point, which is, let's say, late morning or noon for people who don't eat breakfast, you basically are just convincing your body that it's misaligned with where we are on the planet right now. So keep consistent meal times is what I would say. Yes, sir.
Sleep apnea equipment, good or bad? What does it do for you? What does it not do for you?
Sleep app.
Is it medical or is it psychological?
Sleep apnea is the collapse of the upper airway during sleep. It's more common as we get older. It's more common as we get heavier. It runs in families. It is very much a real medical condition. It increases our risk of cardiovascular disease, strokes, heart attacks, congestive heart failure, atrial fibrillation, diabetes, death by motor vehicle accidents, and higher golf scores. So, I mean, all of those things are real. And it also makes you feel just tired and sleepy during the day. It's a mechanical problem, so it requires a mechanical solution, which is either a CPAP machine, which is just a mask that goes over the nose, blows air pressure in the back of the throat, keep the airway open, dental appliances that look like mouth guards to help keep the back of the throat open, and surgery. Yes, sir? How much sleep is too much? Well, I mean, I think I just fundamentally look at the question differently. I mean, your brain, your sleep is a human necessity. It'd be like saying, if you are too tired and sleepy during the day, despite getting an adequate amount of sleep, it means you have an underlying sleep disorder. So there's like, if somebody is otherwise a healthy person and has otherwise healthy sleep, they cannot sleep too much. It's a myth. So. Yes.
Where would you go to, I know you used to have to go in somewhere to do a sleep study, but now I've heard you can do it at home. Where do you go to find out about that?
Yeah, so well, actually that's a good transition to just kind of good sleep resources in your community. Let me give a huge plug, and this is not my sleep center, huge plug for the Health East Maplewood, I don't know the name of the street it's on, but the Health East Maplewood Sleep Center, Dr. Chang, C-H-I-A-N-G, and Dr. Kazaglis. They're both fantastic. But the question specifically was home sleep apnea testing. Home sleep testing is very good if the question you're trying to get after is sleep apnea. And it's a relatively simple case. So, 50-year-old individual, his wife says, "Oh my God, you're killing me at night." Snores, does that at night, falling asleep in meetings. I mean, a home sleep, and not dealing with congestive heart failure or, strokes or any of those sorts of things. Home sleep apnea test is great. Once it gets more complicated than that, if you start talking about REM sleep behavior disorder, you do need a sleep study. Final comment, and I apologize in advance because this is going to sound incredibly presumptuous. I don't have a clinic to see patients. My clinic is essentially closed. Sometimes people come up after me. They're like, God, you know, despite what everybody else at my table said, I really like you. I want to come see you. I'm sorry. I have basically just a research clinic now, looking for people with REM sleep behavior disorder who don't yet have Parkinson's disease. So my apologies about that. But actually, you're in good shape, because that means you'll end up to somebody who is really going to take great care of you. And I'd suggest that, since we're in Maplewood here, the Healthiest Sleep Center at Maplewood, Dr. Kazagos and Dr. Chang, they do a great job. My apologies about the presumption. Yes, ma'am.
What do you think about a young woman told me about CBS, that she's sleeping a lot better now. She's taking it once in a while.
Oh, CBD? Yeah. So again, this gets back to my original thing, which is like cannabinoid, CBD oil. It's cannabis derived. It's like, you know, I put this all in the same category of, you know, as melatonin, as Ambien, as Benadryl, as CBD oil, as, you know, this mindfulness app. You're asking the wrong question. You got to first understand what is your own sleep. I mean, you know, they obviously have some sleep problem, because otherwise they wouldn't be taking anything. And the first thing is to understand what is your challenge first. More important than anything else. So that is all right. I don't know if I got anything left, and I don't know if anybody else wants to hear me say I can't answer that question. So, all right. I'm really honored to be invited, Aaron. Thank you very much. This is great.